don't think y'all ready for this one. I don't think you're ready. Peace and blessing. Shalom. How y'all doing? Let me get my lips right, cause I'm gonna talk about it. Give honor to the source, give honor to the creator. Ancestors known and unknown, of course. Shout out to you, those of you that can be here. You could have been anywhere in the world in the multiverse, anywhere. You could have been anywhere, but you're here with me today. Adios. How you feeling? Did you get up? Did you do something for yourself today? Oh, we're going to talk about it. Man, we're going to talk about it. Let me get right. Oh, let me get right, because we're going to talk about it. Let me put, matter of fact, I ain't got to turn the camera. Well, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, we're gonna talk about it. Oh, that was close. That was close. We're gonna talk about it. Oh, man. I just actually finished up an episode on my podcast about this. It's so wild because it only gives you, well, at that moment, due to that platform, which I'm grateful for, 60 minutes. But I get a kick, a joy out of just even coming on here talking about these things and bringing awareness, because it's like something that it's like that itch you can't scratch, but also like that. Like, I like to use Bernie Mac. He's like, I say the shit you afraid to say. But it brings us more awareness to individually and as collectively, like, what could no longer be, like, hidden. And, like, again, for those, we're in the age of Aquarius, like, everything that's done in the dark comes to the light. But it's like those things within myself that subconsciously, like, creeps up. It's like that monster you've been running for most of your life, and then you like, it creeps up and it finds you, like, you faced with it. It's like, oh my gosh, I gotta, like, either I can run or I can face it. So this topic, leading on from, and if you like to check it out, the link is in my description and or community center. I'll post it. And it talks about, again, psychological warfare. And I'm going to be speaking from my experience, like talking about the psychological warfare on in like, it's going to be different things, like in America or in this country, dealing with, you know, my own psychological warfare, people, you know, certain characters in my storyline or in my life, a lot of things centered around that. And those of you that don't know, you can research, again, go research things for yourself on psychology or whatever. But again, from my experience, from my observation, from my lens, from, you know, source and so forth, seeing through my own experiences. So again, let's give gratitude to the Most High, to source, to be able for me to even face this and be able to bring it forth to whomever that comes into alignment or comes to see this, and whether they vibe with it or not, to each his own. It is what it is, like. But in the podcast episode, I was just talking about a lot of things from my experience, going to the root, and again, the root of things, and then seeing how when you're talking about a fruit, you know, going to the root of the tree and then seeing the fruit, which is like the results of, you know, what has been harvested. And what I mean by that is, like, on a deeper level, like what we have experienced in our lives, what most people don't know, and in the subconscious aspect, and now where we're consciously aware of. So it's like the behavior pattern we didn't realize we developed through whatever our childhood experience. And we soak these things up and then reenacting them, and then now becoming self-aware. So a lot of this is a prompt self-awareness to even some shit we may not even know we've been doing. And seeing the mental illness in that, and seeing how to bring more self-awareness to and taking accountability for like our role, basically, and what we have enabled or didn't even realize we were enabling. Whoa, that's a whole message right now. I could be done with it right there. But again, going back to, I was talking about, let's see, where could I go with this? The psychological warfare from my experience. And I'll start with like just being a melanated man or being a man of a darker color. And again, what I seen young was people not only that looked like me, or from my experience, as you could say, as a human being or someone that's darker, because I'll start on the surface, you know, physical level or superficial, you know, not superficial, but like surface level. My very first experience, you know, let's say as a child, my whom that was supposed to protect me, guide me through, and so forth. You know, I always use this analogy of subconscious, like a submarine, the things that are, you know, a sub emerges into the water, like emotions, like, you know, and no one really knows the depths or the capacity of the ocean. No one knows how much there is, what's in there, and so forth. And whew, the subconscious mind, let's just say, is powerful. So our subconsciousness, you know, things that we have unseen or have hidden away from ourselves, whether emotionally, spiritually, you know, mentally, and so forth, and what we have soaked up. And that can be generationally, that can be from our childhood and so forth. And I always say, like, you know, the womb is where our minds begin. You know, the womb, in the wombs of our mothers, like where we process and are processing things, our emotions and so forth. I'm a firm believer, or just know that, you know, things that what happened in the womb, we also came here to karmically clear, or, you know, things that are passed through the wombs of our mothers, and, you know, we reenacted some way, or we developed some type of, you know, something psychologically, you know. And through that development, I feel that childhood development doesn't just start after the womb. It starts in the womb. So that being said, from my experience through the lens is that when I seeing the women that look like me, and this is probably something like, it's like cracking the code, like, this is something that men probably would never have the courage to say, but I'll be the first to say. And probably things that women probably never would say or acknowledge, but probably would be triggering to both or to whomever. And I'm going to say some things that when it even obtains to people that are darker, and both parts, like when it comes to people lighter shades and so forth, I'm speaking on the oneness aspect of how all are involved. But first, dealing with what I've experienced psychologically young, seeing what I observed and absorbed at the hands of women that were wounded, men that were wounded, in the homes where I talked about this on the podcast. I was like, you know, we all, depending on where you were brought up, and I'm going to go from a ground level to the levels of like global, like individually in your home environment to like a global level. Like, this shit is deep. Like, I love what I do, man. Like, I'm telling you, like, it amazes me how the mind, everything processed, and now things become so clear. So I'm going to go from that aspect of even being brought up in a home where I'm going to start off with the deity of what some may know as Jesus. Now, my grandmother would have an image of a man, or had an image of a man, I don't know currently, but we all know of the character with the blue eyes, the blonde hair, or whatever hair, and, you know, so forth. And my mom had a man that had locks. And, you know, those of you that grew up in a home like this, and again, I'm connecting from what I experienced as a child. and even my child development and so forth. So let's start with that and then dive more deeper into, like, again, how the trauma and pains are connected to that specific root, you know, let's say fruit, but we're going to the root of it. So my mom at the time, I recall, I would say I was in elementary school, she had an image of a man with locks, dark, my complexion, basically. And he had, you know, y'all know this, you know, that grew up in the trenches, you know, there was this image that would go around. And it's probably in a lot of the homes, or I don't know currently. And there would be this image of this man that had locks. And he was, you can say, binded or bound in a way of like having ropes tied around his hands, like this. He was sitting there like this and looking at you. And this how powerful, again, subconscious mind, things that we believe that go away, but in actuality, our past or our memories are still a process, or it's like our genetic makeup in a way. So I remember her having that picture. And then, you know, in the corners of the picture, like the corners, there were men that looked like they were probably like, I would say Roman or Spartan attire. And they were of fairer skin. They were lighter skin. And they were beating him. And I was like saying this on my podcast. I was like, how did that, you know, okay, psychologically, anybody can, you know, common sense would say like, you know, this is me, like, that ain't okay. None of that is this image, you know, in the corners of that, like seeing a man get beaten, hung on a cross and so forth. And I tell myself, I'm like, what is empowering about this? And again, I'm not here to debate with nobody in religion and so forth. I want you to think and literally use your right and left brain to really psychologically look at this shit, this image, before you defend or deflect about what someone has, you know. I'm going to get into the savior aspect. It's going to get real interesting. I'm talking about psychological warfare. I'm talking about, again, how this plays on a man is darker, from my experience, on how there's nothing empowering about this image consciously. And that's even going to the aspect of the slave aspect of believing or taking on certain things. And I'm not going that deep to that. I'm just saying how not seeing something success or empowered or uplifted in a honorable way, you know, in a empowering, prospering way. Imagery. Again, there's an African proverb that I see with my ears and hear with my eyes. That is, from my perception, awareness, a deeper awareness of, you know, when I listen to someone and how they talk, and, you know, and then see, you know, listen how they talk and how they talk about themselves and other people. And then, you know, how when they see certain things, how they perceive it or perceive a people. So seeing with my ears and hearing with my eyes, it's like awareness all around. So again, this image of my mom having this man, again, ropes, bound. And then in these corners are, and I know a lot of y'all can see this picture because your mama or grandma had this image. If they didn't, they had an image of what we call, some may use the term white or Caucasian. Again, I don't get into those things, but people can relate to that. That's why I speak on it. And again, going to that darker aspect of a man, I'm sitting here like, okay, now that I self-reflect, I'm like, I was in environments that were conflict driven. So there was a lot of verbal abuse, physical abuse, young. So with that, I realized like that only reminded her of trauma. Or that, for me, my perception is like seeing that picture of that man being beaten. And so I'm like outside of her, I'm like trying to realize like, going back to what I spoke about before, like that father wound that most women haven't acknowledged or realized internally that they're seeking, internally that they have, and they're externally looking for this acceptance, approval, this protection or so forth that they have energetically put so much emphasis on when it comes to the Father, Son, or Trinity aspect, and not realizing like the disconnect there is that you are that, in a way, that spirit when they're describing the matriarchal aspect. So again, this is playing on my mind psychologically when I'm in a conflict-driven environment where I'm seeing this image of a man, because in that environment, there's nothing. If there's fighting and so forth, and I'm seeing this display between a woman and man, there's nothing else empowering. Because when she isn't facing her wounds or facing her, acknowledging what she's going through, then being that, I've said this before, internally, all men hold an image of a woman. And depending on what they have experienced from the root of their childhood with women, they subconsciously have that and they display that. And women also subconsciously, this is psychological warfare, subconsciously have and hold an image of all men. And based on their experiences with whatever men, they have dealt with or experienced, they are they are either reenacting some type of behavioral pattern or trauma, or, living out, whether they know it consciously or not, through their actions. Everyone, we all done this, me too. So going back to that image, again, even in when I was in elementary school, in that home environment, I used to watch Reading Rainbow. That was also the only, let me wipe this off. That was only, at that moment, Reading Rainbow was the only like melanated man that at that moment in my life, like, I don't even recall his name, but I would say positive, but in a way, because I don't want to make it like seem good and bad, but it's more so that was the only uplifting or empowering image at that moment, moment in my life where I had, because again, I remember him, I don't know if he was singing, but I just remember books and stuff and so forth. He used to go over on Reading Rainbow. Then you had your other shows like, when I was young, like Arthur, Clifford the Big Red Dog, what else? A lot of things that at that moment, like early 90s or whatever, that was my muse, because outside of the environment I was in, that was the only role model of a fatherly figure that, again, through television, that I saw in a more heartwarming way. And so that was something that, again, psychologically, I didn't realize, like, I'm still now realizing, like, whoa, I recall that. So now, going back even to, how can I say this? Going back to, again, the psychological aspect of, media, the television. When there were shows where, let's see, what other shows is on there? Clifford the Big Red Dog. So this is where I like to talk about the colorism, or the first parts of what we see, not only what we dealt with in the home, but what we were introduced to. Clifford the Big Red Dog only had, like, I very seldomly saw people that looked like me on there, even if it was cartoons, because all of this plays a role in psychological warfare. And I just remember the girl, blonde hair, and just, again, certain other shows also displayed people that are a lighter shade, always in this joyous, happy, upbeat tempo of life. So as a child, I'm again soaking things in, because we eat with our eyes and ears, I say, because again, we are what we see we become in a way and what we hear, and not only what we put in our mouths also. So there were other shows like, let me see, when I was younger, basically that didn't, again, portray my in my coming of age, like that did not display a lot of happiness, joy, prospering, other than like you had your Martin, but then there was still things in there where it wasn't always happy, you know, and through that we still develop what we assume to be a relationship, because that's what, like, what we don't realize now, and even with young men and women, it's like you're seeing this stuff, watching these things, and in some way, psychologically, the warfare in that is to trigger or keep you in a state of avoidance, not really facing things within yourself, but to see it, it's like you're processing it, and then you start to become it. And so Martin was one. I remember Family Matters, and I didn't really watch Good Times too much. But again, think about Martin. Now, we'll sit here, you know, you'll see people dress up, but people never acknowledge the fact of like how this thing has been already ongoing when you see men that in that setting or celebrities and stuff that dress up like a woman. And that was my first introduction. And I thought nothing of it. I thought it was just funny. But again, to each his own, there's no judgment, but to call it out, that was the first man that I saw dress up like Shanae. And so, again, young, I knew nothing about the reference of being G-A-Y or being, you know, bi or anything, you know, young. I only knew my mom to, like, at that time, having one friend that we knew of that, from what I see now, it was just very flamboyant or just very expressive in a feminine way, or like have more feminine energy. But I thought nothing of it. I didn't see nothing firsthand. I didn't know nothing about man with man or woman with, I knew nothing about that. Again, young. I just knew that she had a G-A-Y friend. That's it. But, you know, you're young, again, psychologically, you're not thinking nothing of it until you get a certain age to see how these things have processed now. And again, this is a thing that becomes our character development, what we have been exposed to. You know, when I was in certain environments, I was around, you know, again, my muse was certain television. I just remember these memories of going outside and so forth and hanging out with people. And those shows like Family Matters and Steve Urkel, that was the only healthy dialogue that I ever really saw outside of, you know, where I grew up at, other than the family that, again, either conflict driven or gossiping or just very dysfunctional. No healthy ways. A lot of it was forced. A lot of it was centered around wounding and survival. And this is not to devalue people. I'm telling you the root of where, again, subconsciously we have developed, or, you know, our childhood development. So, you know, those certain shows, again, that was the only, for a lot of us, healthy, melanated, or people that look like us, we only saw it on TV. That was a fantasy. But a part of us, like, desperately wanted that because we wanted a peace. We wanted a family or an environment that honored these things or got together, talked about things. So that even goes back to more of now when I would go get kicked out of school or get suspended and go to my great-grandmother's at the moment, you know, when she was here, you know, rest in power to her, she transitioned. And I remember specifically like shows like Madlock, oh my gosh, Andy Griffin, General Hospital. You know, grandma and them, they called them that was their stories. Chuck Norris, you know, In the Heat of the Night, you know, Texas Ranger. And now I see it. I know that that was their muse. But what I realized is like there was nothing else around that really empowered people that look like us. You rarely saw it. I mean, you had your Soul Train, you had certain stuff, but you rarely like saw a sense of like empowerment. And if there was, you're talking about the capitalism behind it, or these false, inauthentic, you know, false identity or inauthentic characters politically, celebrities and so forth that really never I saw, you know, that's what I'm saying, I've seen in communities or really come and, you know, be there and talk about, sit down like I saw, the, you know, Family Matters. So when I'm looking at the show, like, you know, my great grandma used to watch Texas Rangers and, you know, Madlock and stuff. You know, a lot of those shows like Andy Griffin, they were black and white. And again, psychologically, you know, you only saw more images of people that did not look like me. So you didn't see people on there that like look like this, and really on a lot of television shows. General Hospital, you only saw people that were in successful, high-ranking positions, that you rarely saw a character that looked like me in these places, on these platforms, on these, you know, in TV and so forth. So, I wasn't much of a TV fanatic until like I used to be outside in nature a lot or be with my cousins. So again, another thing that's psychological is that at the hands of, you know, going to school, in my earlier years going to school in elementary, you know, a lot of the bullying that I had was, you know, at the hands of people that look like me. And now that I realize, like, a lot of those things were because they were wounded, or they was also in conflict-driven environments. They were also in abusive verbal environments because whatever their mother and father was going through, whether the mom didn't have, you know, a lot of emotional support, mental, physically, and so forth. And not to mention the environments where you're huddled together in the hood and so forth. And the only savior, you know, going back to the religious aspect, is they only have or had these images of praying to this deity that looked nothing like them, another psychological thing. And a lot of the services in these high-ranking positions, or people that had more what we perceived as money or wealth or attainability to certain resources, were people that did not look like them. And so a lot of what I noticed is that I even saw a change in behavior with women that looked like me in those days, to where they would go to church. Let's get into the image of, you know, this so-called lighter skin, blue-eyed, you know, image, to where I was like, how do y'all have more of a healthy relationship, or, you know, this psychological aspect of seeing someone that doesn't look like you and you're holding them more of a higher pedestal than seeing your own people wanting to prosper or receiving them in a loving way. And then I get to the root of it. I realize like that it really has a lot to do with self-hatred. Like, a lot of our mothers did not know their self-worth or self-value. And this isn't all cultures and creed. I'm talking about at the hands of what I experienced through my lens first, and how I developed even a process of, and what they will never say, you will hear a lot of people never say, is, you know, the accountability to where on both parts, when you're talking about, some may use the term white supremacy or and stuff like this, or like I said, I call it self-hatred when it comes to racism. It's like you have to have a deep, ignorant, like deep, you know, internal dialogue that you created not to accept or even embrace people just because they don't look like you, smell like you, walk like you, talk like you, have money, whatever, you know, all these things that, again, that really have no substance. So I saw it on both parts. And this is what I'm getting into. It's like when I saw my mother and them at home or somebody, you know, go out there. And I realized, like, at the hands of their own people, like her first experience, her first traumas, or her first abuser could have been someone that looked like her. Now, that could have led her to repress that pain. And so she's not going to have more of a healthy relationship with women that look like her, or women that, even little girls and so forth, you know. And so then when you look at how the image of, well, when you know, they would go to church or go somewhere and then act one way. Again, this is what I talked about before, like the double life of a narcissist. Like, act one way at home, you know, very impulsive, but then outside in public would be so calm and so forth. And it's not always like that, but there was a lot more aggression, or, you know, at home, and be less aggressive out in public. Because again, being that psychologically, whether they know it or not, a lot of us were in that programming that anything that was lighter, white, the whitest or brighter or lighter of skin, there was this standard, or we or people had this higher standard, whether it goes to the root of them believing slavery, or them believing in a sense of like how, you know, these people, or all of these people have put us here, them not even knowing and acknowledging that people that also look like them had a hand in that. So, but again, due to the narrative, the corruption in the media and so forth that has been pushed, the psychological aspect of that is that some of our mothers, whether they know it or not, due to their own self-hatred of themselves internally, and women and men that look like them, they, the counter aspect, or the opposite of that, they would, you know, due to a supervisor, due to a boss or somebody, they would treat people that did not look like them totally different than their own. And I used to see this firsthand, like the mindset, and I was like, wow, it's deeper than just, you know, one way acting in public, but even in the religious aspect, you know, where I remember going into like neighborhoods where you will see, you know, you will go to summer camps, and I remember like the men that would come, they didn't look like me. They were opposite. They were lighter, but it's like, I just recall, like, I remember the images of these churches, certain churches that were predominantly lighter skinned people, fairer skin, but deep down, they wanted nothing. They'll never say it. They wanted nothing to do with people that were darker. Some of them honestly believed that anything that were darker subconsciously was evil. Anything that even looked darker. Because a lot of them, a lot of their ancestors, or a lot of their, if you want to call them ancestors, a lot of their a lot of them that came before them actually had, we forget about people burning crosses. We forget about people meeting at churches to actually castrate or go out and attack people. We forget, like, it wasn't always like that, because people don't know the depths of even how, you know, from researching and learning things, where before that became so-called church buildings, a lot of our people, or some of our people in certain parts, would build these buildings to actually meet up and teach and learn. And before that came about, you know, these religious things, or things that were forced. So again, when you look at the media and certain things, or just things that have been displayed, the psychological aspect of that with even children, or even myself as a darker colored man, when I looked at television, or when I saw my mother, when I saw people go out there, when I saw how the world was displayed, there wasn't much access to how could I say this? Like, to what they call like the upper class, or, you know, certain things, again, from our environment, there wasn't much access to doing things that it seemed like people who had more money. But then I start to sit back and analyze and observe, and I said, okay, let me discuss this. Let me discuss mulatto. Let me discuss how even some of my schooling, you know, environments where I grew up in, where, well, going back to how women that are darker, you know, and seeing the self-hatred from all levels of how whatever they experienced from the hands of people that were darker, and seeing the woundedness of like, well, why is it like this? Why do they have so much against people that look like them? And then it hit me. Spirit said, well, for one, it's their internal wounds, their father or mother wounds. And they haven't had access emotionally, mentally, you know, physically to feel safe. So then this goes in even to the psychological aspect of even how, and I was talking to someone about this that did not look like me, and, you know, like telling her, like, you know, you do know that there is an image when it comes to representing, you know, even in a country in America, that people that are lighter, there is a stigma, there is this praise around people that is lighter. And that goes to where some may use the term as light-skinned, or even a lighter, a fairer-skinned people. When you look at the media, when you look at the communities, when you look at, there is a higher standard. There is typically an innocence around it. There is there is more support. Let's be real. And I was telling her, I was like, with your color of your eyes, your color of your skin, so forth, this is what has been ignored when it comes to the levels of exposure. Not just, you know, community in the communities, but you can see communities built around it. You can see environments built around it. This is the shit that people want to ignore, and you don't even realize psychologically how that played or has played on your mind, because due to what you have heard, what your parents, guardians have fed you, there is naturally an aggression when it comes to people that are darker. And there's people that are lighter, there's naturally an innocence there. And that is in all levels and cultures and nationalities. And with that, again, me growing up, I wanted to hate every part of myself. Because what I realized is, like, who taught me that? Who has pushed this envelope? When I look at the powers that were, and I see people that was in position, and when I see how, even when my grandmother used to watch certain shows and great-grandmother and certain things, a lot of it was even subconsciously or psychologically around pain, trauma, reminding them of, you know, what they experienced or survival. You know, it made no sense to me, you know, I send love, and I see it now. It's like, even how my grandmother, I've spoken about before, my grandmother being shot and survived. And then to even see how she watches things that are related to people being shot or investigated, you know, police and stuff like that. And then even those shows that will have a person that at that moment, or a lot, again, going back to the colorism, having people that are lighter in places where you see that the prettier girl is perceived as someone's lighter. The image of a woman that is typically blonde and so forth is upheld more than a darker woman. And the reason I speak on this is because even having a child by a woman that is the opposite of what I look like, but to the depths of it, it's like being able to face, to see myself, to see the woundings of women that I at first hand, you know, experience traumas and pain. but also to date women of, you know, different nationalities. So before, like, there's an assumption, like, I'm getting to the root of the psychological aspect to how even myself, you know, I went through it. And then even seeing how their kids that are, some may call, you know, when you're talking about people that look like you, the attack that comes from people that, you know, why you don't talk to someone or have talked to someone and they don't know, you know, or with someone that is your complexion, or, you know, or interracial thing, you know, a lot of things, again, where people don't realize the psychological warfare around all of it. And with that, it's like I saw these things young. I noticed why my grandmother did not, you know, or certain people I knew did not have a preference for people that were lighter, whether they acknowledged it or not. It was something they developed. It was something internally that they never had the courage to speak about, because in a lot of these environments where they grew up, 50, 60, 70, a lot of them were in environments where, had they spoke up about certain things as this, had they even interacted with people that did not look like them and so forth. We're forgetting, like a city that I'm from, Monroe, North Carolina, an elder that looked like me told me, like, they used to hang people or have hung people right at the, like, in the city, downtown, you know, right where the courthouses were. You know, a lot of things that aren't talked about in these school environments. You know, where I went to a school where I believe she was the first, Miss Colston, like, was the first melanated or dark shaded woman to even be a principal in that county, where things that did not happen for people. You know, we were talking about things have evolved. And so again, psychologically, things that we want to ignore, but from my lens, it's like I'm able to pick apart and see, like, wow, this is a puzzle piece to where I am today, to where I have a deep acceptance of even having a child that is, you know, a lighter shade. But I also can see, like, even at a time where they used to call children like that mulatto, you know, where even, you know, men such as myself at a time or at a moment where we were fed so much music that upheld women that were light-skinned, red-boned, at a higher standard than women that were darker than me or like my mother, to a lower standard, to devalue them in every way. Like, this is what I do. I call this shit out. And so for me to bring awareness to it, it's like the deeper part, no matter what people look like, I'm calling out the psychological warfare to where there was moments where we grew up. This has been ongoing from our childhood, where we did not see men consciously and women that looked like us, that were upheld in a higher standard. And then some of us that even when we did, that, let's say they were born or birthed into so-called money or, you know, their family and so forth, then some of them, not all of them, that looked like us, that were darker, they you know, due to when you call this illusion of not first class, must be going on the trip, but mid-class, upper class, lower class, you know, all this shit that creates a divide between people, you know, no matter what they look like, because the lower class are different shades of people, for one. And again, people that we saw that were darker, that was in these positions, whether political, community, and so forth, that did not really lend a hand to really support people that look like us, my mother and grandmother and them, you know, emotionally, mentally, you know, spiritually, you know, uplift them in any type of physical way. And if they did, it was limited. It was more helping. It wasn't supportive. So, you know what I'm saying? So the outcome was never really focused on people prospering. And so, you know, that's why, again, the psychological aspect I see behind it is that I saw people that did not look like me that would come in and be supportive. And I saw people that did look like me that would come in and be supportive. So the thing that really, was really embedded in a lot of people that are my complexion or darker, not saying all, is that we have went through things firsthand from people that look like us. That's where the pain you know, has been imprinted. That's where the blueprint of the healing begins. And not just them that you saw physically, but the ones you don't see. The ones now you see being exposed when it comes to so-called elite or celebrities and so forth. They all run together, or they all try to hide a hand, which now is being exposed on all levels. So there was a thing to where, again, me getting back to the different shades is where, you know, there were a time where a lot of us, what we enable as people that are darker, that really, truthfully, there's nothing that has given us a way of feeling valued, you know. And I'm just going on the physical aspect to really dive more deep into the spiritual, to the depths of things, is that when it comes to that, how we haven't been treated, people that are darker, people that naturally have hair like this, brown eyes, you know, there's been this automatically crucifixion on people that are darker in the school systems, in environments, in the community, and so forth. And it's not to discredit the behavior that has been displayed, but when there are no structures that, when you look at the imagery, whether from television, media, and so forth, when you look at even how they put in the when you see the media and certain things, when you see women that are lighter, you know, than women that I seen, when you see them upheld into a higher standard, that they're more beautiful, just because of their hair, just because of their eye color, just because of, you know, more external shit, that they're more susceptible to getting this position, that they're more susceptible to getting a man. Oh my God, let's talk about it. That shit started when we was in school, yo. Where I would see women like in high school that, let's say I was talking to a girl that was a little bit lighter than me. And she was, you know, at that time, people would call her light skinned. And going back to how I was treated by women that were darker early, at that moment, like the programming that I had, that I'm realizing, like healing from and unlearning, is that a lot of us, or myself, develop a hatred towards, a self-hatred towards not only ourselves internally, but people that look like us. And then, not to mention, it didn't help when you would still get bullied when you did travel or go somewhere, or go into these rural environments, or go into these environments where you knew that there was going to be someone that looked like you that was either going to bully you or going to talk to you, you know, all kind of ways to where it's like it wasn't empowering. You know, we used to joke in a disrespectful way, but laugh at it. But deep down, we knew we were hurt. That's like mental illness. And that's how much we have repressed as a people. We repress these things as if it was okay because of so much, to where we, again, I've talked about in my previous video, it's not just our mothers having a safe place emotionally to express themselves, but the sons that now grow into fathers, you know, now that we have the courage to speak up, but really before that, them trying to even express themselves in these environments where, again, depending on if mom was on Section 8, depending on wherever she was, her structure or her foundation would be threatened with being kicked out, or being, you know, her voucher, Section 8 voucher being, you know, her governmental assistance being taken away from her, and then they don't have nothing else. So again, I'm seeing this firsthand, thinking that this is a part of survival, struggle, and so forth. On the other side of the tracks, you're seeing kids that don't look like you, and you really can go through that neighborhood rather than being classified as a criminal, or being attacked, or being, you know, looked at as if like, you know, like a monster. So this is, again, what has been not only an internal thing for men and little boys and little girls that look like me that are darker, but this is the colorism around even people that I've seen in school, going back to the school thing, like girls that were darker treat the girl that I was dating at the time lighter, like have this jealousy and hatred towards her, this envy. And what I realize now, that it's a part of their own internal battle or what they have experienced firsthand from their mom or dad. And so this is that father and mother wound that they have ignored, or these childhood traumas that they haven't faced. And so there's automatically, whether they know it subconsciously or not, you're talking about women that never talked about the fact of how women that are lighter than them, they unconsciously hold them to a higher standard, whether they say it or not. And because of what the media has been portraying, or what, there's nothing that upholds them or have upheld them to a standard where they should embody not only who they are internally, the beauty, the value within themselves, but there's nothing that reflects back to them in the world that has given them a sense of empowerment, to love themselves, to accept them as they are, and so forth. So in rebuttal to that, they display a behavior of, being angry or not really. And I'm telling you from experience, seeing this, where again, the mothers and aunties and so forth, like, not really be accepting of people that are lighter. And again, this is through psychological warfare over time, like where we have been programmed to not even embrace who we are internally on a soul level, on a level where to see beyond the physical shit. And so when you see this has evolved, when you see like even the entertainers and certain things where, like, it's wild, because I sit back and see an artist that is a lighter shade. And then, let's say naturally their hair is my color or darker. Like I said, I don't care what they do. I'm just seeing the psychological programming to where they'll place an artist here, they'll place an artist there, and immediately talk about dark, lighter, or they're talking about women. Their message is to really degrade darker women, or, there's songs about stuff like that. And artists who actually, literally seeing the powers that were, and people being puppeteering, push this narrative psychologically to where kids don't even embrace or to feel empowered about their naturalness or their authenticity of who they are. And, I've seen artists to where I was like, I see why they put he or she there. Or I see why they put this person there, because when it comes to celebrities and athletes or certain things, and even the psychological aspect of, like, you growing up and just seeing success only in the eyes of a Michael Jordan, or, like, you gotta be this, a basketball player. You gotta be the next football player. And how that even fuels or enable a child to not believe in their natural abilities. And then the psychological aspect of that is like even how you're wanting to be who you are, but all this pressure, all this force, forcefulness around your mother and father trying to pressure you into being the next basketball, football player. The pressure around really them just focusing on that because feel like that's all they have, or that's all their children can be if they want to be successful. Like, it's fucked up as it sounds. It's like, it's just not only what we've been fed through the media, but also what we have been fed in the environments in the community from people, whether they look like us or not. So a lot of people, their first outlet is, and I feel like this is coming up for clarity. Ooh. Again, a lot of these doorways or opportunities, people feel like they can only be successful. It's only through those same things. It's only through basketball, football for men, and women, you know, kind of similar in a way, other than, you know, the whole lawyer, doctor thing. It's like the same thing. But in a way, it's like when you're in these environments, so there's only people that don't look like you, where people have believed like that's the only way I can get out, if I hang around these people, if I talk to these people, or if I get around people with money. That's another thing that was given like that. It's like, you know, this whole illusion that what success and wealth is, and we don't want to believe, but when we were younger, we didn't, by us not seeing people that typically look successful or know what it is, that's where the self-hatred comes into, where we want to be focused more on looking successful rather than embodying success or prosperity or, you know, abundant mindsets and stuff. It's like you are, and when I say, what I mean by that is like, that's why you will see kids like, you know, whether they mothers know it or not, like want to dress them up as success, you know, designer, all these things, where a lot of those designer things or the emblems, the logos and shit were stolen or taken, were copied from people that looked like them, that were darker. And even the psychological warfare on even the fact of how you got to be around people. You know, you got to fake it till you make it. You got to, you know, get all the cars and clothes. You got to do all these things, but believe in yourself. You got to believe more and idolize a person or somebody, and you got to look like them. You got to be like them. You got to go this route to be successful. The psychological warfare, oh my God, I guess I got to call this out too. When it comes to HBCUs, when it comes to even being a part of what they call the black church, you know, the psychological aspect of even trying to be a part of some type of society, fraternity, you know, all those things to be seen physically as successful, to even be in the presence of success, but not really embody it. And I don't mean just success in, you know, I'm talking about, it's like more focused on the conscious aspect of being successful. You know, there was a moment where, you know, went through that stage of like, you think you gotta go down this road, or you gotta meet this person to be successful, or they gotta see what you're creating, you know, to be successful, or you gotta meet this person. And I'm here to tell y'all that's bullshit. When it comes to source and the creator and all like that, if we're all made in the image, we're all valuable. We all have something of substance, of worth. The biggest illusion was to give off that. That's the psychological warfare in there. And that's why it all is always being exposed when it comes to, from the individual self to the communities, to the governmental structures, globally and so forth. It's all been portrayed like that when it comes to the media and so forth. You know, again, there was a moment where I felt that I had to be in the presence of certain people, or I had to hang around a certain people, or I had to, you know, get in this type of environment or be around these certain people. But which I'm grateful for is having a spirit of discernment, or knowing that when I got into certain places, there was more that was revealed to me that couldn't be hidden. And that would show me my uniqueness, to realize like, this is a part of your character development. This is a part of who you're becoming. This is a part of your message. This is a part of your awakening, your healing journey, and so forth. So when I look at the root of a lot of stuff, when it comes to people that are darker, they subconsciously hold in their mind and their body, if you want to use the term white, or, you know, a man and or woman to a higher standard than themselves. And what I mean by, like, it's like, again, how the world has betrayed people, because it's more than just race. I'm just saying, like, on all levels, when it comes to your corporations and so forth. It's like, people don't want to fuck with you. People don't want to deal with you. That people that really look like you, and they put it in your face, but yet they want to use a certain people or certain, to get across their products, to get across to that, what's the word? To a certain people. They want to give off this false illusion or this inauthenticity of, we really want your support. We want your services, but we don't really care to support you in a way. And so those are the things that I start to see, again, no matter skin color, because skin don't make you kin. I just start to see, like, who was choosing sides. And then when it really came to the youth, what are we enabling them to believe or to realize? Like, you want them to have, be so, what are we enabling? More self-hatred of our internal value, and to be more like wanting to world to the fake world, people that are not authentic, to accept us. And that's why, again, I have seen develop from childhood when I see these environments that I was led to. And when you're talking about in the, neighborhoods, churches, and so forth, it's a country that is so divided amongst themselves that the only freaking way that you're going, bruh, to really come in oneness with self and oneness with everything is to see a part of the road that a lot of us enabled, a lot of us fueled, a lot of us supported, whether you knew it unconsciously or not. And so a part of that, subconscious programming is that this is the awareness is on all levels of things, whether you're in a community and whether somebody's there in Beverly Hills or in a whole nother country, some way, somehow, they also can relate to the programming of psychological warfare. For one, I remember growing up, look at how they display darker skinned kids on those freaking African commercials. And that was a part of, like, trying to perceive, like that. We even believe that, to like, oh my God, that's how they all is in Africa, man, let's send some money. They pimp all you out. Even people of different color, you were pimped out. Let's be real. And it's the same thing when you see these structures when it comes to these corporations on all levels. It's the same way how they use celebrities or certain people as an image to uphold, to protect their, to bring service to their brands. They got to put a certain character there so people to support it. So now the collective is becoming more aware of like, wow, it's a beautiful moment to be in. It's a beautiful transition, because all of which is going to the wounding around all of the old world, the wounding around a lot of this is simply just to bring people not only closer to themselves, but the unity, to bring more oneness to everybody, unity to all, no matter what's happening in other countries and so forth. It's like you're seeing the exposure of how much, when you turn on the TV, the media and stuff, like, I used to tell myself, I'm like, why do they parade men that look like me so much on television as if they're the most, and that's how as if they're the most cruel people in the world. And this is how we have become the most hated. Let's be real. And whether people know it or not, it's like they'll put on the front where they, I've seen people that don't even look like me that'll put on the front, and they are scared shitless when I'm in a neighborhood or at a park or somewhere. They are scared shitless. And they won't even say hi or nothing. And that's why I'm able to see, again, their own psychological warfare, because they turn on the news and what they see someone that look like me or even close to me. They don't even realize that's been programming in their mind to believe like all men are like that. It's not to say they got to believe it, but it it's planting seeds that they don't even realize. And so then that's when this tension or something comes up within them. Or they may have dealt with something at the hands of people that look like me. So now they take this narrative and push it. So when it comes to what you want to call it racism, a lot of it hasn't went away. A lot of it's being exposed even more because it shows people really shadow or shows their deep insecurities of you don't like a man or a woman because of their hair, their color, because of how they confidently be who they are. So when I'm talking about even speaking about psychological warfare, I'm talking about all around from people of different colors. We all have been affected by it. There were moments where I only felt like I could only be felt like as a child, I can only experience peace, love, kindness was from people that did not look like me. And that's crazy. But there's people that also, I know millions that have this whole narrative. And then you have people that don't look like me that are, you know, that are lighter, and they won't even acknowledge and realize their own fucked up like internal battle of believing that everything that is darker, or if they are in the presence of that, like in any way that they may feel like they're going to be robbed, they may feel like they're going to be attacked and so forth. And it's not to say that these things have not happened, but they've happened collectively. They've happened everywhere. I'm speaking about how the internal like warfare or things that people refuse to acknowledge and don't even know why they uphold. Even that, you know, when you see these communities, it's like to walk in certain communities. And I told myself, it's like, I wasn't afraid. But one thing I can say about being in a community is like, you know, in the hood, that they call it or whatever, is that I know, I pretty much kind of know what's going to happen or what to expect. My thing that is like, people think that there's no difference for someone that's lighter. I told someone this, I was like, if you go that's lighter, like, if you want to classify them as Caucasian or whatever, I was like, imagine you go living by yourself, or not even by yourself, but there's only you and your daughter, or, you know, you in a predominantly like melanated community. You ain't gonna ever be the same, but there are going to be fears or things that are coming up around that, especially if you never grew up in an environment like that. And this is why I feel like the disconnect and how we break not only generational curses, but generational chains collectively and in the country and so forth, is when you have the courage to sit down with someone that don't look like you, someone that don't come from the same religious background, someone who doesn't have what they call it, the have and the have-nots. Until y'all fucking sit down with people, you will never know the depths of who they truly are outside of what you see on the surface. So when I'm talking about psychological warfare, I know people personally that just because they have a lot of money too, you got to realize how that has been portrayed to the world, because there has been no privacy. You got some people like, let's say that they have, you know, they have millions or whatever. They may not ever want to step foot in the trenches or so forth because they have a fear around they might get robbed or this. And who's to say? I cannot say they will or won't, but it all depends on the mindset of those people. It all depends on, like, if you come in authenticity, because one thing about, like, it's like, one thing I can say about, like, people that grew up in environments like that, we can sniff shit out. Like, it's like a wolf. Like, we can, like a, what they call it? Like a hound dog. Like, a lot of us that have grew up in survival, we can sniff stuff out, like, immediately. So we just like, are you really going to It's just basically like people are tired of just hearing about, you know, people having all these things and so forth. It's like, that's the beauty of the transition right now. When it really comes down to a depth of integrity, I'm glad that people are really seeing it. Like, and that's why I say, I speak on psychological warfare that we all have experienced or getting through or unlearning. But when it really comes down to like really core values of integrity, it's like, it's important for the youth to really see, okay, this person is here, they have this, and they really don't care about you. Okay, this person, you know, and it goes for us too as adults, like this person may have this or this person may be here, but when it really comes down to face-to-face interacting, really, you know, bringing healing and encouraging and empowerment, a lot of these things won't be faced until some of you that are in environments, until you get out of your fucking comfort zone. You know, there's this thing where people feel like just because someone moves away that they just supposed to stay around and just tolerate the behavior. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not asking and telling no one to tolerate anything. But there's a way to go about it. Like, is this like coming on a platform, talking about things when it comes to like, you know, social awareness and really talking about integrity, really speaking about like authenticity, like, and through that, things be exposed. Some of my greatest fears was to even be in environments that I've had to go through, like, you know, being in a predominantly lighter skin community or a fairer skin community. There's a lot of things that come up or came up around that. But it still showed me, no matter what, my integrity mattered. And I couldn't fear, you know, I've dealt with racial profiling, if you want to call it that, or, you know, which I realize now people just want to know who's in their community. Or is this person a threat? You know, I didn't ask for that, but I still stood 10 toes the fuck down. Like, I still stood on business to where I've been pulled over for no reason, or I've been in places where, you know, I talked about in one video, like, followed. Again, this is the awareness of psychological warfare. And also, it's just like people that, I don't care where you at, status, athlete, so forth, they deal with that stuff. They know that if they came through certain communities right now, that it would be no different. They'll immediately be judged for the color of their skin or something that is on some type of surface level. And it's no difference than I told someone, I was like, being whatever your complexion, again, how people or how we've been programmed, people that are darker, depending on, not to say everyone. I was like, if you go in that community, some people, they'll think you either undercover officer, or what, so we might call it DT, or they'll think you like somebody probation officer. Like, I speak on the real, bro. They'll think like you even trying to, or coming to get drugs. Because again, psychologically, a lot of us that have been in communities that, you know, where we grew up in survival, we know firsthand that that's going to be somebody probation officer, somebody either coming to look for drugs and so forth. And we don't even ask ourselves, where have we developed this? What's the root of it? But again, firsthand, a lot of these structures and governmental structures, when you are going to the courthouse, when you are going to, you know, these things, most likely you are going to see a judge or in this judicial system, people that don't look like you. And most of the people that do look like you are going to be out in, you know, are probably going to be being, you know, are in that place of being what they call a criminal. And even to the depths of that, it's like the psychological warfare around, from my own experience of, I told someone, I was like, you know, I be keeping it real with people that don't like look like me. I was like, you will never know the feeling in being in America to where you got to look over your shoulder as a dark man. You will never know that feeling of, and I mean like the fear Now you may feel that when you go into a community that people that look like us, like, I get it. But you ain't ever got to look over your shoulder in the sense of how policing or how the projections of, you know, we're supposed to be protected and served by public servants or people who call themselves police. And we cannot all just believe that that has been a pleasant walk in the park. And even when you look at the media, and it's even how a lot of stuff is twisted. I'm not saying everything. It's just how much psychologically when you're on, whether you're on a platform or looking at stuff, how even the trauma, the pain, even around that, people, like I've spoken about this, like there's automatically to even put on there how a man can be shot down. Like just the psychological aspect, even around violence, around division, around destruction, around consumerism, capitalism, all these things. But I told someone, I was like, you won't know that feeling. You know, and that's that even, because it's like I don't at all want to just make it about color, because it's not about that. But in actuality, when you're in a country or in environments, it's things that you cannot like look past. So you really got to have a sense of fearlessness or like really being secure and safe within your being, within your essence. And that's what I feel like a lot of us, I feel like I realize I have been restored with, you know, on a deeper level, on a more subconscious level of when I was younger. Because again, that's not just in a country of being someone darker. I'm talking about feeling safe and secure within myself of people that if I go into the community that look like me, that I don't have to feel like I got to protect myself from someone who has a mindset of survival. Or if I'm coming up in a new car, I got to feel like I got to, you know, be scared or afraid. So there's a lot of things when it comes around like stuff like that. To be able to walk in communities that I know that people are not accepting or embracing, you know, men that look like me, it can be very intimidating, depending on what they have like experienced through their lens in their life and so forth. So again, it's like, that's the things, those uncomfortable conversations that I be having with myself and on here, is that that's the thing humanity is running from. Instead of looking to like these political people outside of yourself, it's like, have you had those uncomfortable conversations with yourself? And then for you to have those uncomfortable conversations with the people firsthand who have displayed abusive, aggressive behavior. And so, again, I'm able to see like the puzzle pieces in how all of us have in some way have dealt with some type of psychological warfare, trauma, or so forth. So it brings us really closer to our own self, our own insecurities and woundings, to where we can know how to develop a different behavior pattern, a more holistic approach. So that's what I'm going to give y'all today. Y'all take care of yourself. Peace and blessings. Shalom.